We'll now move on to our notices of motion. The first item up is 12.1, Notice of Motion. Councillor Powledge.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move that Kingston Council strongly opposes the Skyrail design for the Frankston line within the municipal boundaries of Kingston Council and calls on the Daniel Andrews Labor government to abandon any plans for elevated rail on the Frankston line, as well as the Centre Road and Clayton Road level crossings on the Dandenong line. Kingston Council supports genuine community consultation. However, the Council expresses strong concern in the recent comments made by Daniel Andrews, stating that the decision on the Skyrail design cannot be overturned in spite of ongoing community consultation. In light of these comments, Kingston Council calls on the Daniel Andrews Labor government to rule out Skyrail as an option on the Frankston line, thereby removing it as an option to be commented on during the community consultation. In addition to the above, Council write to all local MPs, both state and federal, as well as the Premier, relevant state ministers and the Victorian opposition, expressing strong opposition to the Skyrail design for the Frankston line, as well as for the Centre Road and Clayton Road level crossings on the Dandenong line. Lastly, as part of Kingston Council's opposition to Skyrail, Council write to any neighbouring municipalities affected by Skyrail, requesting their participation in a coalition of councils against Skyrail, a lobby group to be formed by Kingston Council and other interested neighbouring councils opposed to the Skyrail design, to be used as a vehicle to advocate against Skyrail to key stakeholders, including the state government, the Victorian opposition, local MPs, both state and federal, and the Level Crossing Removal Authority.
Do I have a seconder? Councillor Gledhill. Councillor Powledge.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and I appreciate the support in the gallery tonight, and also I'd like to acknowledge the Mayor, Tony Holland, as well. Welcome to Kingston Council. And in terms of this particular motion, Madam Mayor, it is an important one. Being a North Ward councillor, having both the Frankston line and the Dandenong line within the boundaries of the North Ward means it is particularly relevant to the North Ward and, of course, the entire municipality. Madam Mayor, the concerns that have been raised to me already by those who have been affected by the proposal along the Dandenong line, in particular, being the proposal which was first aired to the public, means that there is already a lot of angst out there, and the responsibility of councils and elected representatives in terms of representing those views it becomes even more apparent given the Frankston line proposal for the Skyrail as well being something which is not welcomed by the vast majority of people that I've spoken to in attending community consultations already. The strong concern that I have, Madam Mayor, is not only do we have a proposal which is not wanted, but we have questions around the actual community consultation itself. The community consultation process is a vital part of any proposal that government puts to the community in terms of gaining that consensus or gaining consent. However, the concern that is now apparent relates to the comments that the Premier has made, that no matter which way the consultation goes, the Skyrail design cannot be overturned. And that means that Council needs to act now, not in a month, not later on when, after the election, when the Level Crossing Removal Authority proposes to come back to the community in relation to what actual design they're going to go with. We want it ruled out now. And that's because of the impact that it's going to have on the community, Madam Mayor. The impact being that it's going to divide communities into two with an ugly structure, 3 to 4 stories in height, and be something which is going to be seen for miles. In addition to that, when the Level Crossing Removal Authority presented to the Council, we asked them quite clearly, what is the noise impact going to be on the community? And we did not get a straight answer. In fact, I requested personally, the acoustician's report into the impact that the Skyrail design, the elevated rail design, will have on the community. And apparently there is an acoustician's report, or there is some assessment that has been done, but they're not willing to release it publicly. Now, if there's ever a question around confidentiality in relation to information which is particularly relevant to a decision, this would be it. We want that acoustician's report, we want that assessment made publicly available, but they've already refused it, which means to me that the consultation is not as genuine as it appears. Now, Madam Mayor, I'm not going to go on in terms of the feedback that I've had. However, there have been emails coming through already. I do know there are a number of different petitions already around, and some of those have been tabled in the Parliament. But this is a particular concern to the Council, Madam Mayor, because of the strategic planning that we have done down the railway corridors, in those activity centres in particular, at the request of state government. We have performed this function in planning for our city without incorporating this SkyRail design, which means that the apartments that are getting built, the homes that are getting built, were not factored in terms of this particular proposal. So the hit on property prices, whether it's 10%, whether it's 20%, that this SkyRail design will have on our community, means that it's going to have a real detrimental economic impact to the personal lives of those individuals that make up the residents and ratepayers of Kingston Council. And I particularly want to commend the councillors in other municipalities who have taken up that challenge of opposition, opposing this particular proposal, whether it's in Monash, whether it's in Frankston, and call on them to join our coalition of councils against SkyRail. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Powlich. Councillor Ronk.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. Madam Mayor, I've been a resident of the city of Kingston since I was 2 years old, so that's 59 years if my maths is right. And if I was speaking as a resident, just living in Aspendale Gardens or Carrum or anywhere, I'd be right with Councillor Powlich. I think this is not a good proposal, and I live in fear of an above-ground rail system going down our corridor. But I haven't got that luxury as a councillor. I have to try and look at things objectively and represent the community in the best way that I know how. So I'm going to speak against Councillor Powlich's proposal and propose an alternative. And I'll just give a bit of rationale behind why I'm doing this. Madam Mayor, I think our council is best placed to keep a seat at the table for discussions. And my fear that if we adopt this resolution, then we could very well lose our seat at the table for future discussions. We could be quite easily looked on by the Minister, and the Department has already formed a view, so there's therefore no further use in discussing anything with Kingston Council. So I've worked on an alternative motion that I've asked governance to print off, and I'd like to circulate to councillors now, because my fear at the moment is around the community consultation process. All the feedback I've received through email, through various websites, through my extensive networks within the community, I've had no one at all speak in favour of the SkyRail proposal. But I've had hundreds and hundreds of people, and that's no exaggeration, voice concern over SkyRail, and equally that they have no confidence at all in the process to date. So what I think Council is best placed right now is doing what we're good at. This is not a Council proposal. It is not a Council initiative. It's a state government proposal and a state government initiative. So our role is to advocate on behalf of our community, not get drawn into the discussion right now. There may be an opportunity, I'm sure there will be an opportunity at some stage in the near future that we will be involved in that discussion. But right now I think we're best placed to advocate on behalf of our community. So the motion I intend to move, if this is defeated, is based heavily around meaningful discussion within the community, bringing in the community leaders, bringing the groups that are interested into roundtable discussions to get a way forward from here, so that whatever the outcome, we have confidence that at least the process was followed, and the community can accept or reject whatever the outcome is, but at least we'll know that we were listened to. And as part of that process, Madam Mayor, with council's endorsement, if this is defeated and I'm allowed to move my subsequent motion, would it be possible to move Councillor West's 12.6 forward to the next agenda item for continuity, if that pleases the council?
Okay. I'm happy to move that forward if this motion is defeated. Councillors, you have before you a printed one. That's not to be considered at this time. It's to be considered later. Before you speak, Councillor Gledhill. Thank you, Councillor.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. Yeah, look, I seconded the original, which is still there, seconded the original notice of motion from Councillor Powlich. I know it's a complex notice of motion. There's a fair bit in it. It's become an emotive topic, which is unfortunate because it's an infrastructure project. The removal of, there's no mention of that, is there? The removal of level crossings. I think everybody's in furious agreement that that's a good thing. We all want that. There was an expectation that, irrespective of the result of the last state election, that was going to happen. It was going to be done different time schedules and that sort of thing, but that was fine. But I think we were all confident that that was going to take place, and we all as a community accepted that there was going to be some inconvenience with that. I think if you look at what's happening now in Bentley and McKinnon and areas like that, there's roads closed, and Ormond North Road was the same. The community accepts that. They accept some discomfort, and they accept it on a temporary basis. And we all just have to live with that. And it's, if you're the one who gets to the gates and the road's closed, it's not good. But nevertheless, we just have to work with that. What caused me to be confident in seconding this notice of motion was the feedback I've had from the community. Certainly, an elevated rail is a solution. There's no doubt about it. It's you put it up in the air and it goes over the road, and that's it. Job's done. The problem is it has such a long-term impact on people who live near it. And as a councillor, I'm not into designing railways and things like that. I'm into trying to represent the best interests of my community. And in this case, it's a matter of balancing the need to get rid of level crossings and what's going to happen long term, how those people are going to be affected. And it's true that not everybody is affected. In fact, the majority of people in Kingston would not be directly affected. There's 154,000 people. The majority would not be directly affected. They might know somebody who is, but they're not directly affected. But it, to me, doesn't matter. There's a significant number that are in such a way, and this is not the only alternative. If this was the only alternative, then we'd be having the discussion, well, look, how much do we want these level crossings removed at this cost? And we as a community have to determine that outcome. We'd have to talk about that. We'd have to reach resolution. There are alternatives. I'm not going to go into all the other issues that have been raised in terms of how the LXRA are carrying out. Look, I think in fairness it's a difficult task, but there are other alternatives. We do have to talk about those alternatives, because I can't look people in the eye who are going to be directly affected by this and say, well, look, I'm sorry, you've just got to bear that for the good of all, when there's other alternatives. I just simply don't think that's fair. Thanks, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Gledhill. Are there any other councillors? Councillor West.
I'll speak just briefly, Madam Mayor. I think I think it would be wrong to remove this as an option to be commented on during community consultation. It seems to me that the important thing, and we've had previous resolutions to request this, is that all options are considered at the community consultation, that they're fairly considered, and that the survey that's supposed to be held is a genuine survey. So I've just scanned through Councillor Ronk's comments. I'm broadly in agreement with them. I'll prefer to debate this more in the context of my motion if this one is lost, but I can't support this because I think it's way too early to be taking options off the table. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor West. Is there any other councillors wishing to comment? I'll just briefly make a statement on this one. I am broadly in agreement that Council should strongly oppose the SkyRail design for the Frankston line. I am not in agreement in terms of the way Councillor Pallich has set out how he wants to do that. So if he was to do it in 2 sections, I'd be much more comfortable voting on the first section. However, that I will leave up to Councillor Pallich. Would you like to move it all together? The first line.
I'm not clear on what 2 sections. There are a number of paragraphs there.
Yeah, well, the first paragraph I'm happy with.
Look, I'm not understanding of what benefit that would have. And
Then we
what
could
your
discuss how to do it.
No, what your opposition is to those other items. That if you made that clear, I'd be able to respond.
I think there's a place at the table for Kingston to be working with the community and working with the LXRA to get the best outcome for Kingston, and I don't see it genuinely put there in what you've written.
Look, I think the motion is fairly clear in terms of opposition to the SkyRail proposal. To not write to the Premier to express our concern would be completely missing the point.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Pallich. I take that as a no. Councillor Pallich, would you like to close?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I suppose the motion is quite clear in what it attempts to do, and that is to clearly enunciate Council's opposition to the SkyRail design because it is the inferior design, and certainly it's going to have a severely detrimental impact to the community, loss of amenity, visual bulk, noise and disturbance, and of course crime and graffiti. That is why, Madam Mayor, there's already been a number of public meetings, a number of rallies against this in Kingston as well, in Monash, and I'm sure in Frankston as well. And I think Glen Ira was well onto the ball because they've got what they wanted. They've got the undergrounding of it. But there's already been a lot of activation by members of the community, hundreds of people, thousands of people in some instances in Monash, who have activated against this for council not to get behind the community and support the opposition that the community's already expressed quite clearly at the consultations, at public meetings, which you, Madam Mayor, attended, which Councillor Gledhill also attended, and local members of Parliament also attended, would mean that Council's simply ignoring what the community has to say on this particular issue. Madam Mayor, I would just finish by reading one email that I've received on the SkyRail from a concerned resident. Dear Councillor Pallich, I fully support the concept of railway crossing removal, except for the current SkyRail proposal. This is an absolute disgrace, done with no meaningful community consultation. The proposed SkyRail will have the following effects: negatively impact neighbourhood character, create a visual bulk, overshadow property and reduce daylight, attract crime and antisocial behaviour including vandalism, graffiti and dumping of rubbish, decrease property values, increase noise to the surrounding community, have a catastrophic impact on small businesses. I believe the best way to progress this, and he goes on, and it's signed Chris Simpson. Madam Mayor, I think it's appropriate that Council takes a firm position on this issue. It is March. The March, according to this particular motion from Councillor Ronk, the post-March consultation, March is concluded. The consultation, according to this motion, is up, which means...
Councillor Pallich, you can debate that at another time perhaps, but your time is up.
Oh, if I could just request an extension of 30 seconds.
30 seconds. Seconded. All those in favour of 30 seconds?
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Mayor. So in terms of Council's clearly enunciating our position to the Premier and to all the relevant stakeholders, that is the best action that we can take, not merely just sitting around a table and trying to, I guess, water down a proposal which is never going to work and is going to completely destroy the amenity of our suburbs.
Thank you, Councillor Pallich. I'll now put that to the vote. All those in favour? All those against? All those abstaining? Okay. A division has been called. All those in favour? Councillor Gledhill, Councillor Powledge. All those against? Councillor Brownlees, Councillor West, Councillor Ronk, Councillor Stakos, Councillor Bath and myself. Those abstaining? Councillor Eden. That motion is lost. I would now ask a councillor to put forward the motion that to put forward the change to change so that change the order of the agenda so that 12.6 is debated now.
So moved.
Thank you. All those in favour? Okay. Thank you. We'll now move to 12.6.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm not quite sure. I'd like to move that it would be premature for Council to take a position to support or oppose any particular option for grade separations of level crossings until community consultations are complete.
Thank you. Councillor West.
Madam Mayor, I'm not quite sure. I'd like to take. Well, I guess there'll be discussion as to how we can incorporate Councillor Ronk's points. I think they're good. I just thought really that Council has resolved to ask the State Government to undertake a comprehensive community consultation, including an open forum meeting at which the positives and negatives of at least the most feasible options can be presented for the community's consideration. And I hope that Council resolution has been attached. It has. And I think that this it's important to stay in keeping with that motion. The Level Crossing Rail Authority is not due to present such options until a second round of consultations in the middle of the year, and so this is why I'm moving this motion and why I've voted against Councillor Powledge's motion. If I'm satisfied that the community that we've all had a chance to consider options and that we all think it's a bad idea, I will be as strong as anyone in opposing Skyrail. I'm not at that point yet. I think there's a lot of things that we haven't seen or heard. I've attended 2 of the consultations and I've heard a range of views. I've heard concerns from people living close by, quite often people who think that they'll be in front of a Skyrail and they won't be. And my feeling is that there's a great deal of room for more information to inform this debate. I think it's important. I think that this, in a sense, I think it's unfortunate that people are starting a campaign before we know where we stand. Because when you do that, you close your mind and you aren't in a position to listen. I mean, I've heard a variety of good things about Skyrail or of bad things about the trench, because even though we all want grade separations, there are bad things about having the railway and the train in a trench, as there probably are some bad things about having it elevated. And I think that the least we can do, Madam Mayor, is to just try to make sure that our community gets a chance to be fully informed and to fully take part in proper consultation about that. So, for example, I've been told, and I'm not sure, I've been told by officers and by a lecturer I attended, that all of the trees along the railway line will have to be removed if the trench is built, because the trench obviously is going to go through the roots and the trees will have to come out. That the heritage buildings, I know I attended a meeting at the Mentone Station Gardens the other night, and there was an engineer there who said, well, you could keep one side of the heritage building and let the other go. I'm not sure, maybe, but I'm told that it's much harder to keep those heritage buildings, that you might in fact lose them if you close your mind and just go for the trench. I'm told that the trench is actually noisier than Skyrail, because if you notice the design of the Skyrail, it's got kind of like a cradle, sort of an acoustic sort of cradle along the rails to covering the wheels, which is supposed to deflect the noise into the air, whereas in a trench it echoes backwards and forwards. There's a big issue about privacy. I think that's been the main concern that I've heard from people in other suburbs. And there's also a big concern about who's going to maintain and develop the parkland and other good things that could be underneath. One of the arguments for it... Councillor West, can I just make a statement?
I'll need to call to order the member of the gallery who is interjecting. It really is important that our gallery is quiet during the debate. We have a chance to put questions in the box, and there's plenty of opportunity for your voice to be heard at another time. Thank you, Councillor West.
Thank you. I mean, I think people are naturally cynical when they look at the state of the railway lines now, and they look at the rubbish and the generally unkempt condition of the stations and the railway lines, basically since the station masters went. And I think often it's left to voluntary groups like the Mentone one and the Bond Beach Carrum one to do that work. And so I think that it just is way too early to be making up our minds so firmly right now. I think that I had an email from someone who said that when they put up ideas other than Skyrail, they were fobbed off. Well, in fact, I was a bit disappointed that at the consultations, if you ask questions, you were generally fobbed off because they're not prepared to provide information. I think it's probably a weakness myself, but maybe they're afraid of giving information that might turn out to be wrong. So I think that it does make sense if we really seriously think, take part in this consultation and, make up our minds on the basis of evidence and information. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor West. Councillor Stakos? Okay. Councillor Ryan.
Madam Mayor, now I think it would be appropriate to move an amendment to Councillor West's motion, which is in line with what I've circulated. This is my notice of motion in response to Councillor Powledge's. Thank you,
Okay.
Councillor Brownless.
I'm happy to accept that.
Thank you.
Okay, is Councillor Stakos willing to accept that? Okay. Well,
Your copy is something bending down.
it is.
Madam Mayor,
It is now the substantive motion.
Sorry, thank you.
Yep.
I may.
My understanding is that we're accepting that as an amendment, we're adding that to
Yes,
my
yes, absolutely.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
I may, with your indulgence, request an extension of time, Madam, because I'm going to read out the motion, because it's important, I think, for the gallery, members of the gallery to understand my rationale behind what I'm doing, and for anybody that's watching this on live stream. Just the precursors, Madam Mayor, if I was in the gallery, I'd be having the same reaction as they're having right now, because I don't think they understand what I'm trying to achieve here. And certainly it would be the easiest thing in the world for this council to adopt a motion condemning Skyrail and opposing it and basically losing our place at the table, and that would be the last thing we want to do. We become part of the group opposing it rather than trying to facilitate an outcome that the community wants. Right? I've made no secret of the fact that I'm opposed to Skyrail. I think it'll be a monstrosity and I think it'll be a disaster for the community. But that's just my opinion, it's not the opinion of council. If we adopt a resolution condemning Skyrail, that's the opinion of council, and the Ministry Department will not take us seriously in any other discussions. That's a fact, right? So my motion is purely around making sure there is a consultation process. And we have to be really careful about the definition of consultation and information. The Community Council, everybody wants a consultation process. We want to be listened to. We want to voice our opinions, debate it, discuss it. If we're wrong, tell us why we're wrong. If we're right, make our point. That's a consultation process. An information process is a community meeting to tell us what has already been decided. And that's my fear at the moment, and that's all the fears that I'm getting through the websites, through the Facebook pages I'm linked into, people I'm talking to. They don't see the process as a consultation, they see it as an information process. So I'll read out what I'm proposing. It is therefore recommended that Council, on behalf of its community, write formally to the Level Crossing Authority and relevant ministers seeking an agreement with the LXRA, being the Level Crossing Removal Authority, that ensures that it seeks advice from the Council prior to any future phases of community consultation to ensure that A, the intent of Council's Resolution 26th of February 2016 has been satisfied, and if not, Council receives a documented response as to why the LXRA have not or will not be able to address the Council resolutions in full, and that resolution can be found on Council's website. B, the methodology for any future community engagement provides for a range of consultation measures, including but not limited to 1. formalised meetings where options, as envisaged in the previous council resolution, can be circulated in advance of the meetings, then be presented at the meetings, and then allow for community views to be heard both during and post meetings. 2. Meetings being held directly between representatives of the LXRA and identified community groups that have shown a direct interest in grade separation works being planned in the municipality. 3. Randomly selected focus groups being established that bring together a range of community representatives to solicit their views on the options prepared by the LXRA. 4. Suitable mechanisms are established to engage with and receive feedback from members of the community unable to access or utilise online feedback mechanisms. Once again, drawing in everybody in the community. C. The consultation process provides for a clear mechanism whereby interested members of the community can provide feedback through appropriate channels to influence the scope of proposed works in those instances that fall outside the current parameters of the level crossing that's identified for removal. D. The Council facilitate an agreed process between the local community and the LXRA for evaluating the level and quality of community satisfaction associated with the community consultation process prior to commencing the next round of community consultation to ensure it is appropriately evaluated. And I'll add an E at the Council's request. The Council also request a copy of the relevant acoustic reports, which I think is in everybody's interest for those to be released.
Yep, that's great.
Now, all that's really long-winded, and I don't for a minute think that anybody in the gallery or can absorb all that in just one statement. So I'd invite people to read it carefully and see that the focus I'm having is to make sure that the process from here is a consultation process and not an information. That Council can facilitate that, right? Because at the moment we're impartial. We're advocating on behalf of the local community, and we're keeping the dialogue going with the state government. That's important. That is vital for any future direction. I've got no doubt, Madam Mayor and my fellow councillors, that if we adopted the resolution as described by Councillor Powledge, the state government are not going to take the Sky Rail off the table based on a council resolution. They're just not going to do it. But if we do that without any follow-up, without any advocacy for meaningful and real consultation with no predetermined outcomes, then we're letting our community down like you wouldn't believe, and we're virtually, abrogating our responsibility. So I'd ask Council to support that. I'm happy, both as a council and a resident, to take part in any forums, come to any discussions to expand on my rationale, to get those focus groups together, to get those community groups together, to meet with the LXRA, and if possible, advocate to the local member to get a meeting with the minister. Right? We need to get the message across. The community don't want this. Right. Okay, Councillor West just looked at me strange. I've had literally hundreds of people contact me through social forums talking to me. I haven't had one person say they're in favour of Skyrail. That's what I'm basing. Right? If someone contacts me and says they're in favour of Skyrail, then I would say, okay, it's a mixed view. But at the moment, I've had no one do that. So my logic is based on everybody I speak to doesn't want it. But that's not what I'm advocating tonight. I don't want Council to adopt that position. I would like Council to adopt a meaningful consultation process that we can have an input to. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ronk. Councillor Stakos.
Thank you, Councillor Ronk, for moving a sensible motion so that Council can approach this matter with sincerity and with a little bit of maturity. I think I take a slightly different view from Councillor Ronk. The North Ward has, as Councillor Powledge pointed out, 2 lines on it. The impact on the Frankston line within the North Ward in terms of the Moorabbin and Hyatt area, there aren't going to be any grade separations in the North Ward on the Frankston line in Hyatt. Moorabbin's already done. Cheltenham is where there is a little bit of interest for North Ward residents, but I'll tell you what their interest is. They want those level crossings removed. That's the interest. And if it is an elevated line, as long as it's removed. But I'm not saying that to say that there's not going to be any impact on the residents. Yes, when it happens in a commercial area, it's going to be different from the impact on people in a residential area. I'm completely aware of that. I have seen a lot of the emails, and I have seen the social media outcry, so to speak. But what I also know is that in Clayton, what the residents in Clayton don't want is a trench from Hughesdale to Westall, because that trench is going to result in a significant loss of car parking. And for those of you who know Clayton, you know how reliant the hospital is on parking along Horton Road. It is really important. The connection between the south side of the line and the north side of the line is completely disjointed right now. People cannot cross even as a pedestrian from north to south or vice versa when the boom gates are down. Now, I'm not an engineer, but what I do know is that putting a trench across or putting trying to sink a train line under the Patterson River, it's probably not going to work. The train line and the level crossing removal is probably going to have to go over at some locations. And what I think I've accepted and what others have accepted is that this line is going to be probably the most difficult line and the most difficult group of level crossing removals that's going to take place in Melbourne. And what the government need to understand, and what the Level Crossing Removal Authority need to understand, is that we're not going to accept a one-size-fits-all approach. What we need is to look at each of the different sections, each of the different level crossings that are going to be removed on the Frankston line, and decide, is it possible to go over? Is it possible to go under? What are the ramifications? How much can we actually do? Do we actually need a crossing here? Those are questions that we need answered. And those are questions that would have been ignored if Councillor Powlich's motion was successful.
Thank you, Councillor Stakos. Are there any other councillors wishing to speak?
I would like to make a comment now, thanks,
Councillor
Madam Mayor. Disappointing that some of the gallery who exited after they heard one side of the debate didn't stay to hear the other arguments, except just poo-pooing those who voted against what they wanted. I guess what disappoints me more is that Councillor Powlich is right. This really doesn't, Frankston line doesn't affect North Ward at all. It's moved by a North Ward councillor, but I see that as an option now that I'm free to move into the North Ward and start interfering in Kingswood and Green, everything. But look, the basis of it all is I get really upset when it's taken a political tack, and that original motion purely was that and that alone. But the people affected by the issues on the Frankston line are in Central Ward and in South Ward. Central Ward, particularly Cheltenham and Mentone, and that's the area where I live very closely to, and I think the biggest impact on any part of the community is going to be by those residents who abut with their backyards right onto the line between Cheltenham and Mentone Station. They are going to have the biggest impact, and when I asked the question at one of those briefings about the extra lines, I can see the extra lines hanging in their backyards. However, I've had very little input from those residents. Most of the emails I've received, which haven't been hundreds, there have been a few, have been mainly from South Ward residents. So I've had to take that viewpoint and say, okay, maybe they're happy. And I've been to several of the consultation sessions, I've been to the 2 briefings, I've heard what people have said. Again, last Saturday week, approached by people outside, mainly from the South Ward. But look, there's lots of things to consider, and I'm thinking maybe in a cynical approach that we're looking at an option here. What have they done? They've put out the most... No, they haven't really put out. It's assumed that the Skyway will be the option for the Frankston Line rail. It's been assumed. And everyone's gone shock horror, and I don't blame them. I think they're right. But then when someone says, oh, well, OK, you don't like that, here's the other alternative, it could be just as bad, we don't know. And they might go, shock horror, we don't like that either. So I want to see all the options because we haven't seen options. We've seen, and I've got to admit, all the drawings I've seen on display and the booklet we were given in production had a lot of tunnels and tubes and elevated stations on it, but it really didn't talk about this continued bit raised on stilts. It didn't talk about the other options. We know what they are. There's rail over, rail under, road over and road under. And that could happen in some of these properties. Well, and close it. But they haven't, as I said. 10 years ago I started the argument, why didn't we start planning and planning for tunnelling from Caulfield all the way to at least Mordialloc, deal with the creek when we get there. That would have started 5 years ago. I know it's expensive and we haven't got the population to support it, but I just think we need to look at the options, and I support this. I don't think we're going to run out of time, and I like the suggestion of at least trying to get the Minister, heaven help us, we might be lucky, and get them in to say, listen, this is a view of our community. Because the community, I understand, is concerned from what I've seen, and we need to react to that, and I think we've already reacted to that by the motion we passed at the last council meeting, which didn't take a political attack, and you know my views on that. I've said it before. We don't want to stand them up against the wall and try and shoot them down. We want to try and negotiate an outcome that is acceptable to our community, one that they will be, because I think there is a way forward. But I close, Madam Mayor. I know my time's up. Sorry.
Thanks, Councillor Brownlees. I was lenient because there's a few that have gone over time. So, are there any other councillors wishing to speak on this one? Thank you, Councillor Gledhill.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. Look, thanks, Councillor Ronk, for your considered response and amendment. I just reiterate what I said speaking to the last notice of motion, that we've got to be doing, as a council, we've got to be doing what is in the interest of the community, first and foremost. The LXRA, I didn't speak too much about them last time, but I'll just elaborate. I've been to a number of consultations, and as recently as last Thursday night, Councillor West and I went to one that was conducted on behalf of the Friends of Mentone Station and Gardens. And there was a couple of engineers, and there was a communications person there from the LXRA, and the engineers were, as they have been all along, very courteous and very informative, and were happy to talk about any approach they could take. But as I said before, I'm not into designing train lines, but they were happy to talk about anything people wanted to raise and to discuss any option. The same level of satisfaction that everybody got from the engineers was not reflected in the satisfaction we got from the communications person, who really struggled to communicate. And I would have thought that was a basic tenet of that job. And I think that's where this is sadly falling down, because, again, I go back to the fact these are people's homes. These are people who believe that there may be something that's imposed upon them that is totally going to change their lives and devalue their greatest asset. And as a council, we simply have to be resolute in trying to get the best outcome we can for those people. And I think that it's important to have discussion, and it's important to have consultation, but it's not like joining the club and just going along with everything. It has to be always underpinned by us working on behalf of our residents. This is a government and level crossing authority project, and it's a very, very worthy one. Our responsibility lies with our residents. We have to make this work for them. We don't have to make it work for the LXRA. We certainly don't have to be obstructive, and we have to be cooperative. And I think as a council we are. Whenever we get that opportunity, whatever agency we work with, we do that. But this is about an outcome for our residents, and we've got to stick to that, and we've got to be, this is not as perhaps confronting as the last notice of motion, but nevertheless we need to stick to the letter of this thing and make sure that we deliver for these people. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Gledhill. Are there other councillors wishing to speak? Yes, Councillor Eden.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd support Councillor Ronk's motion here, and I'd start by saying one of the things...
Just correct you, it has been moved to Councillor West.
Councillor West amended by Councillor Ronk's motion, albeit substantially. Councillor Ronk's material there. I would support this particular motion, and I'd start by saying a lot of the concern that I've heard from people in the South Ward is around the lack of consultation or the process that's been followed to date. A lot of those turn around and say, I'm not being listened to, I go along, I make comments, and the comments disappear. Or they go along and they put comments online, and the comments then disappear. And I think as a council we need to look at that and make sure that the proper process is being followed and that local residents aren't being ignored on that front. And when you have discussions with them, one of them called me and said, I'm aware that there's a motion on the books that we just discussed before, and we had a discussion, and it was around what will that motion actually achieve for the South Ward? What will it achieve for Kingston? And they said to me, it seems like a bit of a throwaway statement. You jump up and down, you do what's politically popular, you're seen to be doing the right thing, and then you brush your hands of it and you go, no, I've taken your position, I've called for council officers to now go off and form a coalition, I can tick the box, I can put on my flyer that I opposed X, Y and Z, but it's important for us, I think, as a council to sit there and say, no, we want constructive discussion, and we want to talk about the Curram Railway crossing. Do we need to move where the station is so that it can go underground on the other side of the river? We need to look at each crossing and we need to be sensible about it and look to get the best outcome for the community for each level crossing. And the removal authority isn't going to come to us and say, oh, we'd love to have those discussions after you've just gotten up and down, attacked us and said you don't want anything to do with the Sky Rail. That's your position. Why are we bothering to have those discussions with you moving forward when you've already clearly formulated a position? What this motion does is it says we want a proper process put in place so we can get that community feedback and we can then take it to the Level Crossing Removal Authority and ultimately hold them accountable for what the community is saying. And it allows us to have those discussions, because it might be we move some stations a few hundred metres. It might be that in certain areas we have to come up with alternate solutions, but it's important for us not to just get up and walk away from a discussion when we're having one, and to seriously sit down, work through the best solutions, ensure that the Level Crossing Removal Authority is held to account on this, and that we speak to those who are concerned, the ministers involved, and of course our local MPs, to facilitate the best outcome. It's very easy to jump up and down and say, I support all the sporting groups in the community, and then you vote for a budget that doesn't even give them additional funding. It's easy to make lots of statements, but we need to have serious discussions to work through those best outcomes, and this motion will help to achieve that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Eden. Are there any other councillors wishing to speak before Councillor Westclose? Okay, well, I've just got a few things to say, and I think it's really clear from the residents that I've spoken to that they certainly want the level crossings removed, and nobody that I've spoken to so far seems to want to like the Skyrail corridor option at all. And they mention a number of reasons as to why, and they're all ones that we hear frequently when we're talking about developments, and we consider the developments if anyone was developing near them. This is a development near them, and we need to consider it like that. I know we don't get the final say, but we need to help the LXRA in their consultation process. I have seen there's a number of hiccups that they have had in their consultation. The sticky notes were mentioned. I've heard people say that that they've had sticky notes removed, that their ones from the online one have been deleted. So there's a number of things that we need to follow up on to ensure that that consultation, that there is a thorough consultation process that the LXRA are doing. I do note that they have been out to see our community groups, and I understand that the Mentone train station group one was rather frustrating in terms of the discussion there. However, I know the Chelsea Bond Beach train station group actually presented them with some amazing, exciting design ideas and themes for Bond Beach, where they saw that it would go underground at that point. This is the Bond Beach train station group. They came out with some fantastic ideas, and we want those on the table. We want those design ideas. They had a beach theme to their station, and they'd really come up with some wonderful designs. If those are the kind of things that we can bring to the table, we get a much better outcome in the end, because people are coming up with alternatives, like people have mentioned a road over Station Street, etc. So there's a lot of things we can put on the table. If there's going to be a huge capital investment in Kingston, we want to be part of this and get it right, and we've got to change that conversation to positive things that can happen along that line and see what we can do for our community. I know for a fact that at Abbott's Road in Dandenong they came up with one option. It caused an awful lot of problems. You know, the businesses around there really didn't like it, and within a fortnight they came up with 5. So they can get it right, they can go back, they are learning, and we need to make sure that all these things that have happened in terms of hiccups, let's make sure that they get it right for the Kingston line, or do what we can to guide them to get it right for the Kingston line. I'll ask Councillor West to close.
Sorry, just a question before we close. Through you, Mr. Goodman. Do we know what the proposed sky rail, how the height is?
Mr. Goodman, is it possible to answer? I know there is no proposed design yet. The sky rail for the Dandenong line?
Through Madam Mayor, I'm just checking my notes from when Mr. Devlin came to speak. My recollection was about 9 metres off the ground level.
Okay, yeah, the rationale behind that was I'm just curious whether or not a proposal like this would require a town planning application for a structure over 9 metres, Madam Mayor.
That's a good question. Mr. Goodman, could you answer whether it does require
Through you, Madam Mayor,
application?
there's been preliminary discussions with the Level Crossing Removal Authority regarding planning triggers for the project. We will be in a better position over the coming couple of weeks to explain how they might work, whether the council has a role or the Minister for Planning may well have a role to enable the project, which tends to be the way in which significant government infrastructure projects, be they roads or rail, work. The Planning Minister tends to be the planning authority for such projects.
Thank you, Mr. Goodman. On that matter, because there's more information to come on that point, but we'll ask Councillor West to close.
Thank you. Yes, well, I guess thanks to everyone for their contribution, and I'm glad that we're taking a kind of balanced view on this and encouraging really good consultation. I think that's the important thing. I have heard from people who support SkyRail, and they're usually the people who care about a good public transport system and who are thinking more broadly, systematically, I suppose, rather than thinking, oh my God, that would be awful next to me and I don't want it next to someone else either. So, some people think, well, if you've got a railway line on your back fence, would it be perhaps better if it's up in the air so you can at least see through to the back fences across the way and maybe you'll have something nice in between? So there are various ways of looking at it. I guess it seems to me that I can understand why we've got, why people are sort of leaping to oppose the SkyRail. As soon as it was announced in the Oakley area, there was a demonstration that morning, all with people, all with banners set up. There's been lots of people who'll tell you what's wrong with SkyRail. We haven't really heard anything much about what might be wrong with the trench or what might be good about SkyRail and not the trench. So we haven't heard both sides. And I have, probably most of the people who have spoken to me about it, there have been some emails that are kind of just anti-SkyRail, but quite a lot of people are saying, I want to wait and see what the options are. And I really think that we've got to go with that kind of thought. I think that's the way it needs to be. And I suppose the most important thing to me, I'm tempted to add another, but I won't, another paragraph. I will say that one of the reasons why my motion is so short is because I thought if I make it any longer, Councillor Ronk will not even entertain it. And so it's ironic that he's the one who's putting in the long motion this time. So what I'd say is I think it's really important that there's a proper representative sample. After we have the focus group, after we have the community meeting, the public meeting, and we all hear the pros and cons, I think it's really important that we have a proper representative, a proper statistically significant representative sample, so we really find out what everyone thinks. Maybe not every single person, but in a representative fashion. I think that's what I'd like to see before I kind of come down on one side or the other. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor West. I'll now put that to the vote as it stands now. All those in favour? That's carried. Calling a division. All those in favour? Councillor Gledhill, Councillor Brownlees, Councillor West, Councillor Bath, Councillor Stakos, Councillor Eden, Councillor Ronk and myself. Okay. Can we go back? Oh, we'll be doing question time.